You've testified you were never investigated, ever for anything. Why'd you lie to this committee? Here's why.
Senator
It's because people are killed in these kind of incidents. It is an act of terrorism.
Your time is expired.
A special agent in charge found that you were involved. You lied to this committee in saying that you were never investigated.
Senator
you were never
Hawley.
the target of investigation. In fact, you were.
Your time
you lied to us
is
blatantly,
expired.
and you know it. Director Stone Manning, let me just start with this. When you came before this committee in 2021, this is before I was a member of the committee, you were asked as part of your confirmation whether you'd ever been investigated, arrested, charged by any federal, state, or local law enforcement authority for the violation of any federal, state, or local law, regulation, or ordinance other than a minor traffic offense. We asked that question of all people before the committee. You answered no. Do you stand by that testimony?
Senator, I do stand by that testimony and was proud to be confirmed to do this job.
What's tree spiking, Director?
Senator, again, this committee engaged quite a bit.
No, that's a factual question. Do you know what it is?
And I do. It is.
Do you want to tell us? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's when people illegally put metal objects into trees so that they prevent a timber sale.
What happens if a chainsaw hits a spike?
Sometimes when a chainsaw hits a spike, it can buck the saw.
Yeah, violently recoil, potentially kill or seriously maim the loggers.
Yeah, which is why I notified the federal authorities that I had heard that had.
Loggers like, for instance, George Alexander, this is from an article on the Washington Post explaining what happens when trees get spiked. Loggers who are blue-collar workers, by the way. These are not wealthy people. These are not people who have had the advantages perhaps you and others have had. People like George Alexander, who, for example, in May 1987, at age 23, his chainsaw hit a tree spike. I'm quoting, his face was slashed from eye to chin, his teeth were smashed, his jaw was cut in half. That's a typical reaction when a logger hits a spike. Now, you just said, I think just a second ago, that you were involved. There were 2 people convicted in 1989 of putting 500 pounds of spikes in an Idaho forest. Senator Rich mentioned this just a moment ago. You testified you sent a letter to the Forest Service on their behalf. I have it here. The letter says, among other things, this letter sent to notify you that the post office sale, that's the forest sale in Idaho, has been spiked heavily. The reason for this action is that this piece of land is very special to the earth. It is home to the elk, deer, mountain lions, birds, and especially the trees. It goes on, I would be more than willing to pay you $1 for the sale, but you'd have to find me first, and that could be your worst nightmare. P.S. You bastards go in there anyway, and a lot of people could get hurt. Why'd you send this?
Senator, as I said at the time, over 30 years ago, a really angry and turns out violent person handed me that letter and said, will you send this to the Forest Service?
And you did. Why?
What you just talked about in 1987 to a logger, this is 1988, 9. I understood that people could get hurt.
Why didn't you notify the federal authorities? Why did you send this threatening letter on behalf of these 2 men who were convicted of crimes?
I was terrified of them and wanted no involvement with them.
So you wanted no involvement, but you sent a letter that says you bastards go in there anyway and a lot of people could get hurt? Why didn't you just contact the FBI or anybody, any local authority?
Because the person who did this act threatened people's lives if they disclosed who did it.
Yeah, in fact, you were investigated for being involved, weren't you? Here we have a letter sent to this committee from the special agent of the USDA Forest Service, Michael Merkley, who was in charge of the investigation. He says, and he details this in the letter to this committee, that he investigated you for your involvement. He says, and I'm going to quote now, grand jury subpoenas were issued for hair samples, handwriting exemplars, fingerprints. These subpoenas were served on persons suspected of being involved, having knowledge of the incident, including Ms. Tracy Stone Manning. You've testified you were never investigated, ever for anything. Why'd you lie to this committee?
Senator, this committee delved deeply, went into the court records where I testified against these men.
Were you issued subpoenas?
No.
You were not issued subpoenas?
I was issued a subpoena to appear before a grand jury with
Really?
with
Because
about 13
here's what he
people.
says. Ms. Stone Manning was extremely difficult to work with. She was antagonistic. She was uncooperative, refused to provide her hair, handwriting exemplars, and fingerprints as ordered by the grand jury. It was not until after we informed her she would be arrested if she did not comply with the subpoenas that she provided the samples to me. So you were
Senator
subpoenaed.
Hawley,
You
your
were
time
the
is
target of an
expired.
investigation.
Do you have a question?
You were the target of an investigation. You lied to this committee. Why?
Senator, I never received a target letter. I'm curious, I understand why this committee jumped over 30 years of my career in considering my nomination and went to a salacious moment from graduate school where I tried to protect people. What I don't understand is why we're not looking at the last 3.5 years now.
Here's why.
Senator
It's because people are killed in these kind of incidents. It is an act of
Your
terrorism.
time is expired.
A special agent in charge found that you were involved. You lied to this committee in saying that you were never investigated. You
Senator
were never
Hawley.
the target of investigation. In fact, you were.
Your time
You lied to us
is
blatantly.
expired.
And you know it.
Thank you. Senator Brasso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Stoneman, the Bureau's Rock Springs Resource Management Plan will devastate the people of Southwest Wyoming, lock up millions of acres of land, local communities, the entire state relies on those lands. The governor, state legislature, county commissioners, local communities all strongly oppose this plan. So why are you ignoring Wyoming's opposition to the plan across the board?
Senator, thanks for the question. As you know, the Rock Springs plan is, there's a draft out. There was a public comment period. There was a lot of hyperbole about facts that were not true about the plan. So we've done a lot of education work with your constituents about what's in the plan. More importantly, we extended the public comment period and worked with the governor. He stood up a task force, and those folks got to walk in the shoes of our BLM field staff in Rock Springs to give us recommendations for the final. We're digging in, looking at those recommendations, and I am certain that Wyomingites will see their voices reflected in the final.
Well, I just hope the BLM does not dig in, but actually reverses course on this issue. Last month, the Bureau took steps to prohibit coal leasing in the Powder River Basin. The Bureau claims that coal production in the region won't be impacted until the year 2038, so 14 years from now. The Bureau claims that existing leases are sufficient to meet expected demand for coal. My question then is, why is the Bureau taking this action now if you don't say it's going to have any impact for at least 14 years?
Senator, thanks for the question. As you know, the President has asked us to turn and transition to a clean energy economy. The lands in the Powder River Basin are leased through 2041. And so you see the draft or the final before you. The record of decision is still in formulation.
Well, I'd point out that the front page story in the New York Times not too long ago pointed out that this president's pipe dream is not actually something that can be possibly done in our country and in our needs for energy, as the committee hearings have shown again and again and again. I think this plan is completely reckless. Last year, the Powder River Basin supplied 45% of all the coal mined in the United States, and if this carbon-free grid doesn't materialize, and I don't believe it will, what do? You suggest that we start importing coal from China and other places?
Senator, I have great faith in the ingenuity of the American people. We are hard at work every day. We have permitted 7.9 gigawatts in just 3.5 years. I believe we can reach the transition the President has asked us to reach.
Well, I agree that the ingenuity of the American people, it's really hard when your agency continues to block efforts to produce the critical minerals that we need and so much of the product that we need for the American economy. So in April, your Bureau issued a rule that will dramatically raise bonding requirements on oil and gas producers. This is money that producers must pay up front in order to operate on federal lands. According to the data from your own department, there were only 37 abandoned wells on lands managed by the Bureau. It's less than 0.1% of all the wells that the Bureau manages. So how do you justify your decision to increase bonding requirements by as much as 25-fold?
Senator, both the Government Accountability Office and the Inspector General have written reports that suggest, I think rightly so, that our bonding rates, which are over 60 years old, are not high enough. We have thousands of idled wells on our public lands, and idled wells are the last stop before they become orphaned. Not all of them become orphaned, but the GAO found that thousands of them will.
Yeah, well, I don't buy it. This rule to me is completely arbitrary, it's punitive, and you're trying to drive oil and gas producers off federal land. I think it's disgraceful. Finally, in my remaining time, Wyoming is home to the large population of greater sage grouse and its habitat. For over 15 years, with Republican governors, Democrat governors working together, Wyoming has been at the forefront of adopting new management approaches to protect the species. Instead of working with Wyoming, your Bureau plans to upend the state's successful efforts at balancing conservation with economic development. Why are you ignoring a state that has proven time and again that it can successfully protect the species?
Senator, respectfully, I have a different view on our work with your state. We've been meeting twice weekly with the state of Wyoming as we develop the sage grouse plans. The only way to make these plans work is to work together with our partners in the states, and we have been doing so, and Wyoming has been helping us lead the way with the sage grouse task force at WGA. We are literally line editing the documents together, so I believe that they are going to have the durability that they need for success for the sage grouse.
Yeah, John Kennedy spoke at the University of Wyoming in 1963, and it was part of his tour of conservation in the West. And he said, we need to maintain a living balance between man's actions and nature's reactions. I have a picture of him giving that speech. Tom Udall's dad, who was Secretary of Interior, was with him that day in Wyoming, and it just seems that the BLM has gone a long way away from maintaining a living balance and basically trying to shut down the state of Wyoming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.